Welcome back to my channel. Today, we are embarking on a massive deep dive exploration of the hit book and audiobook, What's Your Dream? By the serial entrepreneur and visionary, Simon Squibb. Before we jump into our first 1,500-word chapter breakdown, let's talk about the man himself. Simon Squibb, often affectionately called Simon Square by his followers for his solid foundational logic, has a story that sounds like a movie script. At just 15 years old, following the sudden death of his father, Simon was kicked out of his home and found himself homeless. With no degree and no safety net, he started a gardening business that eventually spiraled into a career spanning 19 companies. After selling his creative agency Fluid to PwC for a multi-million-pound sum, he realized that retirement wasn't the goal. Purpose was. Now, through his platform Help Bank, he is on a mission to help over 10 million people start their own businesses for free. This is phase 1 of our 1-hour summary. Let's get into chapter 1. Chapter 1, the definition of a dream. In this opening chapter, Simon Squibb sets the stage by challenging the very fabric of how we perceive our lives. He starts with a provocative premise. Most people aren't actually living their lives. They are merely following a script handed to them by a system that hasn't changed in over 100 years. The industrial education trap. Simon deep dives into the history of the education system. He explains that modern schools were designed during the Industrial Revolution to produce good factory workers. The system was built to prioritize obedience, punctuality, and the ability to perform repetitive tasks without questioning the why. He argues that this system intentionally suppresses the entrepreneurial muscle. When we are 5 years old, 98% of us test as creative geniuses. We see a box and think it's a spaceship. We see a problem and think of 100 wild solutions. However, by the time we reach adulthood, that number plummets to 2%. Why? Because school teaches us that there is only one right answer and that failure is a mark of shame, an F grade, rather than a vital part of the learning process. What is a dream? Simon defines a dream not as a flight of fancy or a nice-to-have wish, but as a galvanizing force. He notes that many people confuse dreams with fantasies. A fantasy is wanting to be rich so you can sit on a beach. A dream is a mission that makes you want to get out of bed at 5 a.m. because the work itself is the reward. He posits that a dream is the intersection of your natural talents and a problem in the world that you feel a deep personal need to solve. It is the one thing that, if achieved, would make you feel that your time on earth was well spent. The permissive barrier. One of the most profound points Simon makes into chapter 1 is about permission. He observes that most people are waiting for a boss, a parent, a spouse, or the market to give them permission to pursue their dream. He uses his own story of homelessness to illustrate that when you have nothing, you realize that permission is an illusion. You don't need a certificate to start, you just need to start. He challenges the reader to look at their entrepreneurial muscle like a physical muscle in the gym. It might be weak right now, it might have atrophied from years of sitting in a cubicle, but it is still there. The goal of this chapter is to give you the mental weights to start training that muscle again. Reframing work and play. Simon argues that the work-life balance movement is actually a symptom of the problem. If you need a balance between your work and your life, it implies that your work is draining your life. He suggests that when you are aligned with your dream, work is life. It provides energy rather than taking it. He encourages readers to stop looking for an exit strategy from their jobs and start looking for an entry strategy into their purpose. Disclaimer. The What I've Learned section below is based on my own interpretations, personal reflections, and interproduction of the text. These insights are my subjective takeaways as a reader and do not solely represent the author's literal words, but rather how I am applying them to my own life. What I've learned from chapter 1 after absorbing the first chapter, the biggest aha moment for me was the realization that I have been a victim of grade A thinking. I realize that I often delay starting new projects because I'm afraid they won't be perfect right away. Simon's breakdown of the education system made me see that my fear of failure is actually just a leftover habit from high school. I learned that failure in the real world isn't an F, it's actually the only way to get to an A. I also learned that I've been waiting for permission. I've spent years thinking I needed more followers, more money, or a better title before I could call myself an entrepreneur. This chapter taught me that the title comes after the action, not before. Finally, I learned to distinguish between my fantasies and my dreams. I realized that a lot of what I thought were my dreams were actually just escapes from a job I didn't like. A real dream shouldn't be about escaping. It should be about engaging. I've started looking for my galvanizing force, that one thing that makes the work feel like play. Chapter 2, The 4 Myths of Success. In this chapter, Simon Squibb moves from the why to the what. Having established that we are all born with an entrepreneurial muscle that has atrophied, he now identifies the specific lies, or myths, that keep that muscle from growing. He argues that these 4 myths act like invisible chains, keeping people tethered to a life of quiet desperation. To reach a dream, you must first dismantle these false beliefs. Myth 1, the hard work lie. We are often told that hard work is the key to success. Simon disagrees. He argues that if hard work were the only factor, then the people working 3 manual labor jobs or cleaning offices for 80 hours a week would be the wealthiest and most successful people on earth. The reality is that hard work is a multiplier, not a foundation. If you work 100 hours a week on the wrong thing, you just get to the wrong destination faster. Simon emphasizes high-leverage work, the kind of work that scales. He challenges the reader to stop being busy and start being effective. Busyness is often a form of laziness, mental laziness that prevents us from doing the hard, scary work of thinking strategically. Myth 2, the failure myth. In the school system, failure is the end of the road. It's a red mark on a paper. It's a reason to be held back. Simon rebrands failure as data collection. He shares that in his 30-year career, he has had more failed ideas than successful ones. The difference between him and most people is that he views each failure as a compound learning event. He explains that success is like a combination lock. Every time you fail, you've simply tried at a number that didn't work. Instead of walking away from the lock, you should be happy because you now have one less number to try. The more you fail, the closer you are to the combination. Myth 3, the possession myth. This is perhaps the most culturally relevant part of the book. Simon discusses the Instagram trap, the desire to look successful before you actually are successful. Many people spend their first profits on a fancy car, a designer watch, or a luxury apartment. Simon calls these golden handcuffs. The moment you increase your lifestyle costs to match your income, you lose your freedom. You can no longer afford to take risks or quit the job you hate because you have to feed the lifestyle. He advocates for staying lean for as long as possible. The goal isn't to own things, it's to own your time. Myth 4, the difficulty myth. Finally, Simon addresses our natural tendency to avoid things that are hard. We are taught to look for the easy way or the life hack. Simon argues that hard is your best friend. If a business is easy to start, everyone will do it. If it's easy, the profit margins will be thin and the competition will be fierce. When you encounter a problem that is incredibly difficult to solve, you should be excited. That difficulty is a moat that protects your dream. If you are the only one willing to do the hard work, you will be the only one reaping the big rewards. What I've learned from Chapter 2. This chapter forced me to do a value audit of my life. I learned that I have been wearing golden handcuffs without even realizing it. I looked at my monthly subscriptions and my habit of buying upgrades I don't really need, and I realized that those things are actually stealing months of my freedom. I learned that if I lower my cost of living, I increase my rate of dreaming. I also learned to change my vocabulary. Instead of saying I failed, I've started saying I found a number that didn't work on the lock. This has significantly reduced my anxiety when a project doesn't go as planned. I realized that my fear of failure was actually just an ego problem. Lastly, the hard work myth hit me hard. I realized I was using busy work, like checking emails and tweaking my website, as a way to avoid the difficult work of actually talking to customers. Simon taught me that hard work isn't about physical exhaustion. It's about the mental courage to do the things most people are too afraid to do. Chapter 3, Turning Pain into Purpose. In this chapter, Simon explores the fuel that drives a dream. He argues that while many people start businesses for passion or profit, neither is strong enough to survive the inevitable hardships of entrepreneurship. Passion can fade when things get boring, and profit can disappear during a market dip. The only fuel that is truly unquittable is purpose, and most often that purpose is found in your personal pain. The Kelly's Canines case study, Simon shares one of his favorite stories to illustrate this. A woman named Kelly who wanted to start a dog grooming business. On the surface, it looked like a standard service business. However, when Simon dug deeper, he found that Kelly had a history of feeling abandoned and neglected in her own life. Her true purpose wasn't just washing dogs. It was ensuring that no living creature under her care ever felt abandoned or unloved again. Because her business was built on righting a wrong from her past, she had a level of resilience that her competitors lacked. She wasn't just working for a paycheck, she was on a mission. Simon posits that your pain point, the thing that makes you angry, the thing that made you cry, or the injustice you've suffered, is actually your greatest business asset, the resilience of the why. Simon deep dives into the concept that the why is more important than the how. He explains that most entrepreneurs fail because they get bogged down in the mechanics, the how, and forget why they started. When you have a purpose-driven dream, the how becomes flexible. If one method of solving the problem fails, you don't quit. You simply find another way to fulfill the purpose. He encourages readers to look back at their lives and identify their gaps. Where did society fail you? Where did a product let you down? Where did you feel a lack of support? That gap is where your business should live. By solving that problem for others, you are essentially healing that part of yourself. Authenticity as a marketing strategy. In a world of AI-generated content and corporate polish, Simon argues that authenticity is the ultimate competitive advantage. When your dream is rooted in your own pain, you don't have to invent a brand story, you just have to tell the truth. People gravitate toward founders who have skin in the game. He notes that customers today can smell a fake mission statement from a mile away. However, when you speak from a place of lived experience, you build an immediate bond of trust that no amount of advertising spend can buy. What I've learned from Chapter 3. I learned that I've been looking for market gaps when I should have been looking for personal gaps. I realized that the most energized I've ever felt was when I was solving a problem that had personally frustrated me for years. Simon taught me that my weaknesses or past struggles aren't things to be hidden. They are the foundation of my brand story. I also learned that passion is overrated. I've started many hobbies because I was passionate about them, only to quit 3 months later. But when I look at the things I do out of a sense of purpose or duty, I never quit. I realize that to make my dream a reality, I need to tie it to something bigger than my own bank account. Lastly, I learned the power of the why. I've spent too much time worrying about the how, the technical details, and the logistics. This chapter taught me that if my why is strong enough, I will naturally figure out the how. I've started rewriting my business goals, not in terms of revenue targets, but in terms of people helped, and it has completely changed my motivation levels. Chapter 4. The 7 Steps of Excuses. The Discovery Framework. In this chapter, Simon shifts from the philosophy of dreaming to the cold, hard reality of starting. He argues that between the dream and the do lies a valley of excuses. Most people stay on the edge of that valley for their entire lives, looking at the other side but never crossing because they've built a wall of buts. Simon identifies 7 primary excuses that act as psychological anchors, and he provides a framework to dismantle each one. The anatomy of an excuse. Simon posits that an excuse is simply a fear in a suit. When we say, "I don't have time," what we are actually saying is, "I am afraid that if I dedicate time to this, I will fail, and everyone will see." He challenges the reader to look past the logical-sounding justification and address the underlying emotion. 1. I don't have time. Simon counters this by pointing out that we all have the same 24 hours. He advocates for a time audit where you track every minute of your day for a week. Most people find they are leaking 15-20 hours a week on mindless scrolling, TV, or overanalyzing. 2. I don't have money. This is his favorite myth to bust. He argues that money is often a stupidity tax. When you have it, you spend it to solve problems that could be solved better with creativity. He believes starting with $0 is actually a gift because it forces you to find a customer immediately. 3. I'm too old young. Simon points to his own start at 15 and to people like Colonel Sanders, who started KFC in his 60s. Age, he says, is just a different type of experience currency. 4. The market is saturated. He argues that saturated just means there is high demand. If a market is full, it proves people are buying. You don't need to be the only one. You just need to be the best version for a specific niche. 5. I don't know how. In the age of the internet, Simon finds this excuse the most inexcusable. Everything you need to know to start, from legal structures to marketing, is available for free. 6. I need more research. Simon calls this procrastination in a lab coat. Researching is safe, doing is dangerous. He pushes for a learn-as-you-go model. 7. And what will they think? This is the social cage. Simon reminds us that most people are so worried about what you think of them that they aren't actually paying attention to your failures. The likes versus dislikes audit. To bridge the gap between excuses and action, Simon introduces his practical discovery tool, the audit. He instructs readers to take a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle. On one side, list everything you like doing, hobbies, tests, conversations. On the other, list everything you dislike, emails, commuting, specific types of people. The goal is to find the sweet spot, an idea that involves your likes and solves a problem you've identified in your dislikes. He notes that your dream shouldn't just be about doing what you like. It should be about designing a life where you never have to do what you dislike. What I've learned from Chapter 4, I learned that I am a world-class procrastinator in a lab coat. I've spent months researching the best camera gear for this channel instead of just filming. Simon taught me that I don't know how is actually a choice to remain ignorant. I realized that the information I need is already at my fingertips. I just wasn't reaching for it because I was scared of the responsibility that comes with knowledge. I also learned the power of the time audit. I realized that I was scrolling away my dream. By reclaiming just 1 hour a day from social media, I found 7 hours a week to dedicate to my business. That's nearly a full workday. Lastly, the likes and dislikes list gave me a massive amount of clarity. I realized that my current career path was 80% dislikes. This wasn't just a job problem, it was an energy problem. I learned that my dream doesn't have to be a complicated, world-changing invention. It can simply be a way to spend more time doing what I love while helping others. Chapter 5, The 3 Big Questions and the One-Sentence Rule. In Chapter 5, Simon Squibb addresses the clarity gap. He observes that when he stops people on the street and asks, "What is your dream?" most people give a vague 5-minute-long explanation that leaves them both more confused than when they started. Simon argues that if you cannot define your dream with surgical precision, you will never be able to execute it. Complexity is the enemy of execution. To solve this, he introduces a 3-step interrogation of your soul and a strict formatting rule for your mission. The 3 big questions. Simon posits that before you look at spreadsheets or market trends, you must answer 3 questions that define your internal compass. 1. Who are you? This isn't about your job title or your role as a parent or spouse. Simon wants you to strip away the labels society has given you. Are you a builder, a storyteller, a healer, a disruptor? Understanding your core identity ensures that your dream is authentic to you rather than a borrowed dream from a celebrity or a peer. 2. What gets you excited? Simon describes this as the time warp test. What activity can you engage in where 4 hours pass by and it feels like 4 minutes? For Simon, it's talking to people about their ideas. For you, it might be coding, gardening, or organizing. Your dream must be built around this high-energy activity. 3. What difference do you want to make? This is the legacy question. If you were to die tomorrow, what problem would remain unsolved because you weren't there to fix it? This shifts the focus from self to service. which Simon believes is the key to long-term happiness and business success. The one-sentence rule. Once you have the answers to these questions, Simon forces you into a brutal simplification. He argues that every successful business on earth, it can be explained in one sentence. If you need a pitch deck or a 50-page business plan to explain your idea, you haven't thought about it deeply enough. He provides a template that acts as a North Star for every decision you make. My dream is to action for specific audience, so that impact result. By forcing your dream into this box, you do two things. You make it easy for people to help you because they understand exactly what you do, and you make it easy to say no to distractions that don't fit the sentence. What I've learned from Chapter 5. I learned that I have been hiding my lack of direction behind big words and complicated explanations. I realized that the reason I couldn't get people to invest their time or interest in my ideas was that I wasn't giving them anything clear to grab onto. Simon taught me that clarity isn't just for the audience, it's for the founder. I also learned the power of the time warp test. I look back at my week and realize I spend most of my time on tasks that make every minute feel like an hour. This chapter was a wake-up call that I am building a life around things that drain me. By identifying my core identity as a teacher, I was finally able to write my one-sentence dream. Lastly, I learned that who are you is the hardest question of all. I spent years identifying as my job title, and when that title was gone, I felt lost. Simon taught me that my who is my constant, and my dream is simply the vehicle that carries that who into the world. Chapter 6, Financial Freedom and Buying Back Your Time. In this chapter, Simon addresses the biggest anchor holding dreamers back, the cost of their own lives. He explores the concept of the golden handcuffs, a state where your monthly expenses have risen so high that you are literally forced to keep a job you hate just to maintain a lifestyle you don't even enjoy. Simon argues that you cannot chase a dream while being a slave to a mortgage, a car payment, and a dozen subscriptions. The trap of lifestyle creep. Simon observes that most people follow a predictable and dangerous pattern. As soon as they get a raise or a promotion, they immediately increase their spending. They buy a bigger house, a better car, or start eating at more expensive restaurants. This lifestyle creep effectively erases their freedom. He posits that wealth is not about how much money you earn, but how much time you own. If you earn £10,000 a month, but your bills are $9,500, you are poorer than someone who earns £2,000 but only spends $1,000. The second person has the time wealth to quit and try something new. The first person is trapped. The burn rate audit. Simon introduces a practical, often painful exercise. The burn rate audit. He instructs the reader to look at every single penny leaving their bank account. He categorizes spending into investment, things that move you toward your dream, and waste, things that just provide temporary comfort. His advice is radical, cut to the bone. He suggests that if you are serious about your dream, you should be willing to move into a smaller apartment, sell the car, and stop the luxury spending. Every pound you save is a brick in the wall of your freedom. By lowering your survival number, the minimum amount of money you need to stay alive and healthy, you lower the risk of starting your business. Buying back the clock. The ultimate goal of this chapter is to shift the reader's mindset from buying things to buying time. Simon explains that the first stage of entrepreneurship isn't about getting rich. It's about earning enough to buy back your 40-hour work week. Once you own your time, your ability to grow your dream increases exponentially. He views money simply as a time-purchasing utility. What I've learned from Chapter 6, I learned that I have been a slave to my stuff. I realized that my car payment was effectively owning my Tuesday and Wednesday every single week. When I calculated my survival number, I was shocked to see how much of my income was going toward things that didn't actually make me happy. They just made me feel normal compared to my peers. Simon taught me that normal is just another word for stuck. I also learned the power of the burn rate. I've started treating my savings not as a retirement fund, but as a freedom fund. I realized that if I cut out unnecessary luxuries, I could survive for 6 months without a paycheck. That realization took away 90% of the fear I had about starting my own business. Lastly, I learned that buying time is the best investment I can ever make. I used to think that spending money on a virtual assistant or a cleaner was lazy, but Simon made me see that if it frees up 5 hours for me to work on my dream, it's the most profitable purchase I could make. I've started valuing my time at a specific hourly rate, and it has changed every decision I make. Chapter 7. Build a boat. Risk mitigation. In Chapter 7, Simon addresses the all-or-nothing fallacy. Many people believe that becoming an entrepreneur requires a blind jump, quitting your job, burning your bridges, and hoping you find wings on the way down. Simon, having been homeless at 15, knows the reality of having no safety net, and his advice is the opposite. Do not jump. Build a boat. The dock and the boat, Simon uses a powerful metaphor to describe the transition to entrepreneurship. Your current job is the dock. It is stable, it provides a paycheck, and it keeps you dry. Your dream is the ocean. To get into the ocean safely, you need a boat, your side hustle. He argues that the biggest mistake people make is jumping off the dock before they've even started building the boat. This leads to survival mode, where you are so worried about paying rent that you make desperate, short-term decisions that eventually kill your dream. Instead, he advocates for building the boat while you are still standing on the dock. Use your 9-to-5 salary to fund your 5-to-9 dream. The 3-customer rule. Simon introduces a strict metric for when it is safe to leave the dock. He calls it the 3-customer rule. You do not have a business because you have a logo, a website, or a business card. You have a business when 3 people who do not know you have paid you for your product or service. Customer 1 proves the idea has potential. Customer 2 proves the first one wasn't a fluke. Customer 3 proves there is a market. Until you have 3 paying customers, Simon insists that you stay on the dock. This mitigated approach removes the gambling element of entrepreneurship and replaces it with evidence-based progression. The micro-step strategy. Simon deep dives into the psychology of overwhelm. When we think about starting a business, the task feels too big, so we do nothing. Simon advocates for micro-steps. Instead of launching a brand, your micro-step today is buying a domain. Tomorrow it's sending one DM. By breaking the dream down into tiny, manageable actions, you bypass the brain's fear response and build momentum. What I've learned from Chapter 7, I learned that I've been using financial risk as an excuse to stay paralyzed. I realized that I don't need to quit my job to be an entrepreneur. I just need to start building my boat in the evenings. Simon taught me that the most successful entrepreneurs are actually risk-averse. They don't take leaps of faith, they take steps of evidence. I also learned the importance of the 3-customer rule. I've spent so much time in the past playing house, designing logos and thinking of business names without ever actually trying to sell anything. This chapter taught me that the only validation that matters is a stranger's credit card. It shifted my focus from branding to selling. Lastly, I learned the power of the dock. I used to resent my day job, seeing it as a prison. Now, thanks to Simon, I see it as my investor. My job is the venture capitalist that is funding the development of my dream boat. This shift in perspective has made me much happier at work and more disciplined at home. Chapter 8. Start poor, grow rich. In this chapter, Simon delivers what is perhaps his most counterintuitive lesson. Money is often a distraction. In the world of venture capital and Shark Tank, we are conditioned to believe that the first step to a dream is raising capital. Simon argues that for 99% of people, receiving a large sum of money at the start is the quickest way to kill a dream. He champions the concept of bootstrapping, not just as a necessity, but as a strategic advantage. The creativity versus cash dynamic. Simon explains that when you have a large budget, you tend to solve problems by throwing money at them. You buy expensive software, hire consultants, and rent a fancy office. When you have no money, you are forced to solve problems with creativity, grit, and direct human connection. He posits that the lean phase is where the soul of the business is built. Because you can't afford ads, you have to talk to people. Because you can't hire a team, you have to learn how every part of your business works. This creates a founder who is deeply connected to their customer and their product. Simon believes that starting poor ensures that by the time you do get money, you actually know how to spend it wisely. The MVP, minimum viable product, Simon deep dives into the good enough principle. Many dreamers never launch because they are waiting for their product to be perfect. Simon argues that perfection is just a high-level form of procrastination. He advocates for the MVP, the simplest, cheapest version of your idea that still solves the problem. If your dream is a restaurant, start with a pop-up stall. If it's an app, start with a simple landing page or a manual service. The goal is to get into the market as fast as possible to see if people actually want what you're building. He famously says, if you aren't embarrassed by the first version of your product, you launch too late. The social currency over financial currency. Simon introduces the idea that in the beginning, relationships are more valuable than revenue. When you start poor, you have to rely on the kindness and support of others. This forces you to build a community. He argues that a community of 100 people who love you and want you to succeed is worth more than a $100,000 marketing budget. What I've learned from Chapter 8. I learned that my lack of funding was actually a lack of imagination. I used to say, I can't start this YouTube channel because I don't have a $2,000 camera. Simon taught me that the poor way to start is to use my phone and focus on the value of the message. I realized that the bells and whistles don't matter if the core idea isn't solid. I also learned to embrace the embarrassing first version. I've stopped trying to make everything look corporate and professional. By being raw and honest about being in the startup phase, I've found that people are actually more willing to help me. I learned that perfect is the enemy of done. Lastly, I learned that money hides mistakes. This was a huge revelation. I realized that if I had been given a big loan a year ago, I would have spent it on all the wrong things because I didn't truly understand my customer yet. Starting poor has forced me to become a better businessman because every penny has to earn its keep. Chapter 9, Find Brilliant People and Give Without Take. In Chapter 9, Simon tackles the myth of the self-made man. He argues that no one achieves a massive dream alone, but the traditional way of networking, where people swap business cards and look for what they can get, is fundamentally broken. Simon introduces his core life philosophy. Give without take. This is the strategy he used to build his reputation and his businesses from the ground up, and it is the foundation of his platform, Help Bink. The give without take architecture. Simon explains that most people operate on a transactional basis. I will do this for you, but only if you do that for me. He argues that this limits your opportunities because it creates a barrier of friction. When you lead with a take mindset, people feel guarded. Instead, Simon advocates for providing value up front with zero expectation of return. This could be giving someone a brilliant idea, making an introduction, or offering your skills for free to someone you admire. He posits that by doing this, you create a reputation dividend. When you give without taking, you aren't being nice. You are being strategically generous. You build a massive bank of goodwill that eventually comes back to you in ways you could never have planned or invoiced for. The Dream Doorbell and the Power of Asking. Simon discusses the fear of the ask. Many dreamers have the right idea but are too afraid to reach out to brilliant people who could help them. He shares stories of his dream doorbell, where he literally knocks on doors or stops people on the street to ask, "What is your dream and how can I help?" He points out that most successful people actually want to help others, but they are rarely asked in the right way. The right way to ask is to show that you've done your homework, that you've already started building your boat, and that you are willing to give back to the community in your own way. He argues that a single conversation with the right person can save you 10 years of hard work. The No Jerks Policy. As you find people to join your mission, whether they are partners, mentors, or your first employees, Simon insists on a no jerks policy. He believes that skills can be taught, but character is permanent. He encourages readers to surround themselves with people who share their why and their give without take spirit. One brilliant jerk can destroy the culture of a dream faster than any market crash. What I've learned from Chapter 9. I learned that I've been networking all wrong. I used to go to events thinking, who here can help me? This chapter taught me to flip that question to, who here can I help? I realized that by being the most helpful person in the room, I naturally become the person everyone wants to talk to. It has taken the ickiness out of networking for me. I also learned the value of reputation capital. I used to worry about people stealing my ideas or taking advantage of my free help. Simon made me realize that even if one or two people do that, the other 98 will become my superfans and advocates. I've started spending 30 minutes every day on forums and LinkedIn just giving advice for free, and the doors that have opened in just a few weeks are incredible. Lastly, I learned that I am only one ask away from a breakthrough. I've always been too proud and are too shy to ask for help from people above me. This chapter taught me that if I approach them with a give first, or even just a very clear, respectful ask for advice, most people are surprisingly generous. I've started reaching out to mentors I used to think were out of my league. Chapter 10, The Community of Superfans. In the final chapter, Simon brings the journey full circle. You have identified your dream, dismantled your excuses, built your boat, and led with a give without take mindset. Now Simon discusses the final stage of long-term success, scaling through community. He argues that in the modern world, the most valuable asset a dreamer can own isn't a patent, a building, or a piece of software. It is a community of superfans. The 1,000 true fans concept. Simon builds on the famous theory that you don't need millions of followers to have a successful life and business. You only need 1,000 superfans, people who will buy anything you produce, who will drive 100 miles to hear you speak, and who tell everyone they know about your mission. He posits that the way to build this community is through the consistency of your values. If you are authentically living your one-sentence dream and helping people every day, your community becomes your marketing department. They protect your brand, they give you honest feedback, and they provide the social proof that allows you to scale. The Help Bank vision and legacy, Simon concludes by discussing his ultimate dream, Help Bank. He explains that this platform is the physical manifestation of everything he's taught in the book. It's a place where help is the currency. He envisions a world where the entrepreneurial muscle, nurtured from childhood, and where anyone, regardless of their background or bank balance, can find the support they need to start. He challenges the reader to think about their own legacy. Once your boat is a ship and you have achieved financial freedom, what do you do next? Simon's answer is to go back to the dock and help others build their boats. He believes that the ultimate stage of entrepreneurship is paying it forward. Final words. It only takes one. Simon ends the book with a powerful emotional reminder. It only takes one person to believe in you, and that person should be you. He shares that throughout his journey from homelessness to millions, the biggest obstacle was always his own mind. He encourages the reader to stop reading, stop planning, and go out and do one small thing today that scares them. What I've learned from Chapter 10. I learned that I've been chasing vanity metrics, likes, followers, and views, instead of focusing on superfans. I realized that I would rather have 100 people whose lives are genuinely changed by my work than 100,000 who just scroll past it. This has changed how I interact with you, my audience. I want to build a real community here, not just a following. I also learned that the dream doesn't end with making it. Simon taught me that the most rewarding part of his journey wasn't selling his company for millions. It was the work he is doing now to help others. I've realized that I need to build giving into my business model from day one, not wait until I'm rich enough to care. Lastly, I learned the importance of self-belief. I've spent so much time looking for external validation, awards, certificates, and praise. Simon's story reminds me that when he was sleeping on the streets, no one believed in him but himself. That self-belief was the only thing the world couldn't take away from him. I learned that my dream is my responsibility, and I'm ready to take ownership of it. Conclusion. Thank you so much for joining me on this 1-hour deep dive into What's Your Dream by Simon Squibb. We've covered everything from the industrial education trap to the 1,000 superfans strategy. Simon's journey is a powerful reminder that it's never too late or too early to start, and that your pain is often the key to your purpose. Simon is still out there today, literally knocking on doors and helping people for free. He is proof that the give without take movement isn't just a slogan, it's a way of life that works. Thank you for listening and watching. If you found value in this 10-chapter deep dive, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive. 2. Hit the like button to help this message reach more dreamers. 3. Share this video with one friend who you know has a hidden dream they are afraid to start. Final task. Comment below with your one-sentence dream using Simon's template. I will be reading every single one, and who knows, maybe someone in our community is the exact person you need to help you get your boat in the water. See you in the next one. Keep dreaming.